Welcome back to my channel. Today, we'll be discussing The Flower of Alosha by Jang Ryang. If you haven't already, click the subscribe button now and get your BL Library card for the BL Library. Before we get started, there will be spoilers, so if you don't be spoiled in this novel, go ahead and click off now. No worries, I'll catch you next time. For those of you left behind, let's go over some content warnings. There may be references to male pregnancy, pedophilia, not involving the main couple, mentions of molestation, not involving the main couple, murder, rape, including gang rape, drugging, blackmail, extortion, mentions of execution and or capital punishment, mentions of chronic illness, excessive drinking or possible alcoholism, blood, homomesia, missing persons, sexism, classism, sexual harassment, power imbalance, ableism, manipulation, obsession, orphans, violence, sexual assault, mentions of torture, mentions of war, strangulation, mentions of attempted suicide, death, overdose, mentions of homelessness, mentions of mental illness, mentions of child abuse, animal death, fat shaming, self-harm, pregnancy, including teen pregnancy, possible miscarriage, mentions of abortion, slut shaming, gaslighting, ghosts and hauntings, mentions of enslavement, self-deprecation, ritualistic sacrifice, dark magic, forced pregnancy, theft, gossiping, superstition, birth, confinement, incest, sex work, and mentions of cheating, as these things do appear in the novel. But if that's all good with you, let's go and get started. Kay is living his best simple life as the vice captain in Lablin. He's a bit of a womanizer, enjoying the company of women, though never more than one at a time. This does come at a price, earning him the ire of his captain, who often longs for the very women that Kay ends up with. It is an annoying, but small problem in his life, so Kay is relatively happy at the end of the day. But Kay's simple world is rocked when none other than the Grand Duke Zigriel arrives in this small, cold region of the Empire, unannounced. Zigriel is well known for his chaotic and cruel nature, and though he isn't the Emperor, his brother, the Emperor, who has been ill for some time, has no successors. So he has all the power of the Emperor without the shackles of the crown. What is a man with such power and freedom doing in this snow-covered rural region of the Empire? As it turns out, Zigriel, alongside his attendant Schumann, isn't here for Lablin, but for the subregion of Edor, which is well known for being dangerous and near impossible to reach thanks to the surrounding forest of the dead. They're after something called the Alosha's flower, and they need a guide to get there. Unfortunately for Kay, as soon as Zigriel lays eyes upon him, the Grand Duke wants Kay and only Kay for the journey ahead. Kay, unable to deny the wants of someone with such power, has no choice but to acquiesce. Kay anticipates this mission will only take a few days, and then he'll be able to return and live his everyday life back in Lablin. But what Kay doesn't realize until it's far too late is that Zigriel wants Kay as a guide and a bedmate, and once he gets a taste of him, he has no intention of letting Kay go. First off, this is dark. Super dark. I'm on a roll with these super dark titles. If you liked No Reason, you'll probably like this. It's as if the harshness of No Reason had a baby, with Who's Your Daddy. There is non-con all over the place. Of course, there is non-con between Kay and Zigriel, but there's also a subplot where there are ghosts in Edor, including that of a young girl Kay estimates to be about 15 years old. Kay ends up being momentarily transported into her experience, where he is then gang raped within her body. It's a very painful, visceral experience that even now turns my stomach. It could have been powerful, seeing her revenge fully play out after being so brutally assaulted, but unfortunately after her revenge begins, Kay, Zigriel, and Schumann leave, and it's never brought up again. So much time is spent on Edor and the Forest of the Dead, but it's abandoned entirely once the main cast leaves, and really that's how most of the plot points are, hollow and superficial. It often feels like it loses the plot, abandoning the story of Edor and rescuing Lablin. The zombies and monsters are all but forgotten, which was disappointing since they seemed like such important aspects of the story early on. On a more positive note, I will say that the quote-unquote romance in this is a bit more palatable and present than in No Reason, though barely. Kay's character is out for one thing: survival. All of the characters are defined by very basic wants. For Kei, like I said, it's survival. For Schumann, it's wealth. And for Zigrel, it's the freedom to continue doing as he pleases. These very basic motivations guide the characters throughout the story. Schumann will only do something for the right price, which a Grand Duke has no problem paying. Zigrel is hunting down the flower and causing immense havoc and chaos because he wants freedom from ruling as the emperor and just loves the destruction he leaves in his wake. Finally, though Zigrel is a threat to everyone, he's a port in the storm for Kei when everything else is crashing down. So while Zigrel has done nothing but torture and rape him, Kei willingly runs to Zigrel as his main protector. It never really manifests in love from Kei's side, more in a relationship of convenience, and coercion of course, which I actually appreciated. It was a much more realistic evolution of their relationship than Kei just deciding he loves Zigrel despite how cruel he is. Kei just needs a protector, and who is better than Zigrel? It could have very easily gone the Stockholm Syndrome route, but it didn't, which was rather refreshing. I also like that Kei's motivation for protection stems from his past as the sole survivor of his family's massacre. Unfortunately though, the introduction to this information is lackluster at best. We're just given all of Kei's past in the most anticlimactic way, and the main story ends soon after. The world feels so expansive, but so little of it is actually explored. There's a moment in the novel when Kei, while pregnant, plans to return to his homeland, which I was super excited about. That would have made for a much more interesting exploration of his past, especially since it hadn't been revealed that he was a noble before his family's destruction. We could have gained insight into how they lived before the Empire took them over, and maybe could have seen Kei reliving some childhood memories as he traveled through familiar areas. But we unfortunately don't get any of that. Zigrel just tells us that he had a background check done on Kei, what he found out in that check, and then that's it. That's the extent of the exploration. It was so disappointing and just reflected more of that superficiality in various plot points. Then we have the very last extra, dubbed the Hidden Chapter, featuring Schumann, a greedy magician who I actually really liked throughout the story. He seemed so charismatic and firmly planted in his motivations, wealth, which I appreciated. He often seemed like the rock among these flighty and unpredictable main characters. I loved him, and when I realized he was getting his own quote-unquote romance in the series, I was excited, until I saw it was with his half-brother. I have to make this clear, I'm not here to tell you that you are wrong for liking incest in fiction. If that's your thing, cool beans. But for me, there's nothing that turns me off more than real incest. I don't mind pseudo-incest titles, especially when there's some foundation for it, but this real incest just came out of nowhere. I do love how this romance didn't play out with mutual love, much like Kei and Zigrel's relationship, and was entirely predicated on Schumann wanting his brother's wealth in exchange for his quote-unquote love, but I still wasn't fond of the incest out of nowhere. I wish this had some kind of foundation and relation throughout the main story, but here we are. Before I close out, I want to touch on the quality of the writing. It feels very clunky, often intermingling multiple POVs within a single paragraph, which makes it very hard to follow. The first sentence might be Kei's thoughts on something, and then it will talk about Zigrel feeling some way about it, then close out the entire paragraph with Schumann's thoughts. There are also many times when words are misspelled or sentences are broken into fragments without much meaning. One particular unfortunate section is towards the end when the word ladder is misspelled as latter multiple times. I'm prone to my fair share of grammar and spelling snafus, so I try to show grace, but the multiple POVs in the same paragraphs mixed with the grammar and spelling mistakes just make this a challenging read overall. With translated titles, it's hard to say how much is on the original versus how much is on the translation, but either way, it's rough. With all that being said, this was a pretty big disappointment for me. I was really looking forward to this title because I had heard so many interesting things about it, including some of my favorite things like fantasy and male pregnancy. While those things are present, which is great, other major story elements are abandoned or cast off. Pair that with muddled writing and it just doesn't turn out the way I wish it would have. I still think this is interesting and some people probably would enjoy it, but it ultimately wasn't for me. So, have you read The Flower of Alosha? If so, what do you think? Do you agree with my assessment? Do you not? Let me know in comment below. Otherwise, I'll catch you next time. Bye!